The 2 days of Rosh Hashana were treated with great seriousness, in some way more than any other holiday. Of course, every holiday is awesome in its holiness and in its importance and in its meaning. But Rosh Hashanah was different. I say was, I'm talking about how the Rebbe treated Rosh Hashanah. The Rebbe would not speak, hardly at all, not even holy subjects. Certainly the first day of Rosh Hashanah, and a little more lenient on the second day. There was a time when the Rebbe was in pain. He had a sciatic pain, and it had flared up. And somebody said to the Rebbitzin, to the Rebbe's wife, how is the Rebbe feeling? Very concerned. And the Rebbitzin said, my husband is not afraid of pain. He's afraid of Rosh Hashanah. Rosh Hashanah was an awesome day for the Rebbe. Let's try to understand a little bit the significance of the day. Other holidays, Sukkot, Pesach, Purim, Hanukkah, even Yom Kippur, they're all very related to the Jewish people. It's celebrating an anniversary of something that happened to the Jewish people. We came out of Egypt, we crossed the desert, we were saved from Haman. On Yom Kippur, we were forgiven for making the golden calf. It was all very parochial. It was relevant to Jews and really not more. Shavuos, the day that the Torah was given, is a little different because it's the Torah for the whole world. The 7 Noahide laws and the obligations of all human beings are also in the Torah. But all the other holidays are strictly Jewish events. What exactly is Rosh Hashanah? What does it have to do with the Jewish people? It's the anniversary of creation, the creation of the whole universe. Angels should celebrate their creation. Humans, of course, should celebrate their creation. The fish in the sea should celebrate their creation. In whatever way fish know how to celebrate. And yet, we were given a special mitzvah of sounding the shofar on Rosh Hashanah. The theme of the prayers on Rosh Hashanah is universal. King of the entire universe, Melech al kol ha'olam, over and over and over, we're talking about something that is not limited to Jews. That's the text of the prayers. And yet the mitzvah to sound the shofar is only for the Jews. The point of it being that in other holidays, more or less, we are inspired and commanded to deepen our connection with God. Gratitude, thankfulness, celebrating the miracles. But on Rosh Hashanah, we are given a responsibility for the whole world that we don't see in any other mitzvah. Because God is the King of the universe, of the entire world. And yet, every year, it really depends on this mitzvah that the Jews do that will determine the nature of the year. In simple language, to be the king of the world is a demeaning task for God. To run the physical universe, to make sure that the sun rises and sets, that's a menial task. That's custodial work. And yet, that's what a king is responsible for. Whether he does it with his own hands or gets angels to do it, but it's his job. And of course, there's no way that the world can exist without God being the king, because then there would be anarchy and chaos. The mitzvah of Rosh Hashana is to coronate God as our king, meaning to ask God voluntarily to be our king, not a dictator. Not that God has to force us into existence and force us to accept his authority over his world. Coronating the king gives God some pleasure in being king. So here's the essence of Rosh Hashanah. How do we make it more pleasurable for God to do this menial task of running the world in the everyday life, everything that needs to happen to maintain life on earth? Now, the world was created, we know, through words. God said, and there was. Now, regardless of how we understand God's speech, the fact is, God wants us to know, and he opens the Torah with these words: I created the world through speech. In some way, when we speak, we are imitating God or reflecting God. So the words we say on Rosh Hashanah take on a very special significance. This is the anniversary of creation, and all creation came through speech. Of course, divine speech. But human speech on Rosh Hashanah also has a powerful effect. So if we say positive things, we're producing a positive energy, in a way supporting creation. Of course, every day when we speak positive, we're adding positive energy, but it doesn't compare to Rosh Hashanah. And that's why so many of the prayers in the Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur liturgy follows the alphabet. In other words, every sentence begins with the next letter in the alphabet. In that way, we have the entire alphabet drawn into holiness, into godliness, so that every letter of the Hebrew alphabet is saying godliness. So the entire speech phenomenon is devoted to godly purposes. That makes the world that was created from these letters and words more godly. When the world is more godly, it means the world is more receptive to God. In other words, we want him to be our king. And we want only him to be our king. Ein lanu melech elo ata. It's not a complaint. We have no other king but you. It's not a complaint. It's not a problem. It's a preference. We want no other king. Only one. This affects the entire world, which means the fate of nations, which is the fate of mankind, depends on what happens on Rosh Hashana. So God gave us an awesome responsibility. When you say these words of coronation and sound the trumpet, the shofar of coronation, the pleasure in being king is increased, the closeness of creator to creation is increased, and therefore creation is elevated to a higher, healthier, stronger, more godly existence. Now, this year in particular, nations are in trouble. Not just one nation, all nations. And they are dependent very, very obviously, very clearly on some blessing from above where God has to intervene, an act of God, as the insurance companies call it, to make sure that the world grows, progresses, not, God forbid, the opposite. So this year, Rosh Hashanah is in some way unprecedented. The world has never been in such need globally. There were always countries in trouble, usually where the Jews were, the superpowers. But to have every country in the world so confused and so lost, directionless, has never been. And so this year, when we blow the shofar and hear the sound of the shofar, which is the mitzvah, we're really determining the fate of the world. How much pleasure will God have being our king this year? What does that pleasure depend on? How enthusiastically we accept him as our king, and how enthusiastically we want to be his people. So, on the one hand, it's an awesome responsibility. Like the Rebbetzin said, the Rebbe is afraid of Rosh Hashanah, the responsibility. On the other hand, if God says that when you do this, everything will be improved and go well for the entire world, that's such good news. So it's like doing brain surgery where the responsibility is awesome, but the fact that it can be done, new methods, new procedures, people who could not survive in the past now have a chance because we have this more sophisticated way of performing the operation, more sophisticated equipment, and so on. That's thrilling. And so Rosh Hashanah is awesomely thrilling. It's got a certain seriousness to it, but it's a holiday, not a fast day. So we need to celebrate this awesome responsibility, but with a sense of awe. So it's important that as many Jews as possible should attend the blowing of the shofar. The Chabad custom is that every shliach Every rabbi, every chassid who has a shofar and knows how to sound the shofar makes it available to his neighbors, to the people on the street. Anyone, anywhere, during the 48 hours of Rosh Hashana, if they hear the sounding of the shofar and fulfill that mitzvah, they are contributing to the welfare of the universe, of all the nations of the world. That's what we call Judgment Day. Judgment Day is not just reward and punishment. Judgment Day means, what is the fate of the nations of the world? And from there, of course, it trickles down to the individuals in those nations, down to the smallest detail. And which fate are we talking about? God's pleasure in being our king. That is completely dependent on us. Let's make it a pleasant year for God. We tell God, we want you to be our king. We love having you as our king. We don't want any other king. And unlike last year, where there were times when you had to force yourself on us to make sure that we don't destroy ourselves, this year it will be all cooperation, no resistance. The way you want the world to be, that's how we want it to be. And we will do everything we can to make the world your kind of world. And we're enthusiastic about it, and that gives God great pleasure. So I want to wish everybody a year of good tidings, of good news, in all the things that we're worried about, that we agonized over. We should have only good news. We should have all the blessings that God can give and will give. If we're receptive, if we're excited, we can get more. We can handle more. We can receive more. So we should have all of those blessings. It should be a pleasure to serve God, which would make it a pleasure for God to be our God and to be our King and to be our Father. And every Jew can make a difference for the whole world. So anyone you know who may not be aware that Rosh Hashana is coming, that Monday night, which means Tuesday and Wednesday, are the 48 hours in which we can determine the degree of pleasure that God has in being our King. May it be a pleasure for everyone, beginning with God Himself, and may life become only pleasurable, the way it's meant to be, the way it was intended to be, and the way it hasn't been for a while. So all the blessings from A to Z, from Aleph to Taf, a year of enlightenment, a year of wisdom, a year of goodness, a year of kindness. Of course, we're asking all of that from God, but we're also pledging to do those same things for each other. Have a great, sweet, good year. We have a Sunday night program for VIPs that you might be interested in. It's informal, it's questions and answers, it's conversation. It's really relaxed, it's really pleasant, enjoyable, informative, and kind of community-like. It's a Sunday night program. There's a Wednesday morning program for the VIPs, and there's a Wednesday night program. All of it just conversation, casual, laid back, unscripted. So join us, take a look, click the link below and see which of the three suits you best, and join us for some enjoyable conversation.